Andrew Mitchell, Ophir Asset Management. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. We're talking about the waste management industry today. Most people would associate waste management with putting your rubbish out, getting it collected and sticking it in landfill. Now, we both know that waste management is so much bigger than that. Can you give us a flyover view of the sectors involved and a bit of background into how the waste management industry is actually set up?
Well, as you said, it's a very big sector. You've got your municipal rubbish, you've got the demolition, and commercial and industrial. And as you pointed out, there's obviously landfill, which plays a big part, but the bit that we pay particular attention to that sits alongside the landfill is the ability to recycle that waste. So that would be the key ways I would break down the industry.
Okay, so what's the attraction to you as an investor of the waste management sector?
I think there's a very good industry structure. You've got three major players and a couple of smaller players out there that have a technological advantage, and that's in that waste treatment to be able to recycle. So you've got a great industry structure. At the same time, the industry is structurally growing. You see a little bit more rubbish gets produced than growth in the economy. So you are following the vagaries of the economy, but there's a little bit more rubbish at it being produced, and the recycling of the rubbish is in real structural growth. So Australia, we sort of sit in the middle of the pack globally. We recycle probably about 40% of the waste that we make, where globally the best recyclers, these countries are doing more like 60%. So there's 50% growth in that recycling, and that's what we're trying to get.
Right, and those countries are typically in Europe. Germany,
Exactly.
I think, is a leader, and places like Sweden.
The Scandinavian countries, exactly.
Yeah, my reading was that Sweden's aiming for 100% recyclables at some point in time. So the recycling aspect is interesting because last year the Chinese introduced the national sword policy.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a flyover view of what that is and what it's going to mean to Australia?
Well, it changes things quite considerably in Australia, especially in the short term. We've seen it actually have a negative impact, although we think longer term that this is undoubtedly positive for the industry. So a lot of the less technologically advanced...
And just before we go on, Andrew, so can you just outline what the national sword policy
what it actually is?
Yeah,
So basically the Chinese became the global dumping ground for waste. Their low labour cost enabled them to recycle a lot of waste paper, especially. And so countries from around the world would take their waste and give it to the Chinese or sell it to the Chinese, and the Chinese recycled it. So what happened was a whole industry emerged in Australia where you're able to buy waste and sell it on to the Chinese and make a profit. Now the Chinese have said, and probably rightfully so, we're not the global rubbish bin, we're going to take less. And so all of a sudden, waste is going to come back into Australia. Now Cleanaway did send some waste to China, so you would have seen that they downgraded, slightly maybe lowered the earnings expectations of the market in the last couple of weeks. A lot of that is to do with the fact that they are now got an extra cost because they're unable to, less revenue stream because they're not able to sell into China or as much into China. But in the long term, this is good because Australia and a company like Cleanaway, we can recycle our waste, and we're probably able to do it better than the Chinese can ultimately, and this will see prices go up as more waste is coming back into Australia, and companies like the Cleanaway and the other European recyclers will benefit from this.
So really waste management is becoming more of a recycling story rather than just pure collection and dumping. Is
exactly.
What
Well, there's still landfill levies work alongside the recycling. So we're seeing landfill levies obviously increase, which is giving extra demand for recycling. If you can divert that amount of waste from landfill and put it into recycling and actually turn it into products that you're able to on-sell later, then there's going to be a lot of value for that. And that's why Ophir is invested in Cleanaway in terms of a long-term structurally growing business.
Okay. Is it too simplistic to say that the landfill levies are going to be diverted to companies that can reduce the landfill capacity and divert those levies to the recyclers? Is that too simplistic?
Well, everyone faces, I guess, the levy, but the challenge is going to be for these recyclers to be able to take on more waste and actually to be able to recycle more than just what they have been to date. So invest in your technology so you can actually process this waste.
Andrew, one of the other things that Cleanaway's done recently is a signed agreement with Macquarie Green Fund, I believe, to deal with waste and turning it into energy. How do you see the future of that evolving for Cleanaway in particular in Australia?
Well, it's the next frontier, I guess, for all recyclers, and certainly Cleanaway has taken the challenge upon itself. But it's a real scale game, so you need to go out and sign these big, long-term, big contracts with the municipalities because you can't do it at a smaller scale. So effectively, if you're able to sell electricity contracts, then you can capture the value add or the parts of the value chain that you weren't able to get before, where someone else was able to capture that value. So it's certainly promising for Cleanaway and other recyclers. And
from an environmental perspective, I think that contract is resulting in something like 500 kilotons of waste diverting from landfill into energy. So it's very good for the environment.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you think are the key risks to this sector from an investment perspective?
Well, the key risk from where we see is it's always up for regulatory change, whether it be a Queensland levy comes on or changes with EPAs, because they're done at a state level. So it's very hard to keep on top of all the different news flow and the change in regulation. But Cleanaway, as a leading technology provider into recycling, should benefit over the long term. It's just you're going to have these short-term speed bumps. And as an investor, as we are, they can be nasty when you see the share price like it is the other day, off 10-15%. But
you guys are long-term investors.
We're long-term investors, so we have to just absorb have shock absorbers to take it, because it's not a nice feeling when a stock's down 15% a day.
No, indeed. And there's a couple of ways of playing this waste management thematic in Australia. Cleanaway you've mentioned as one, which is one of the biggest listed waste management companies in the world. What are the other companies that are involved in waste management here?
Well, the big one is Bingo. That's more in the demolition space. So think about airports being built in Western Sydney, big buildings being demolished and recycling that. So Bingo obviously listed on the ASX. We used to have Tox-Free, which has been taken over by Cleanaway. But they would be the two ones that I would suggest. Or you can invest in a fund like ourselves that has an investment in, and we manage that investment over time.
And just to go with the two businesses that you mentioned, which is Cleanaway and Bingo, you've got a preference for Cleanaway. Can you give us 30 seconds on why you would prefer that to the Bingo investment? And this is not a recommendation; it's just as an example.
Well, there's a lot of reasons. Cleanaway from ourselves is a lot more diversified. The demolition sector is a lot more cyclical, where Cleanaway is involved in obviously the municipalities and more the commercial industrial, so far less cyclical. It's a bigger business. It's got more diversified exposure across the states, and we really see them as industry leading in their recycling and their ability to lead technology in Australia. We think their balance sheet puts them in a good place to make acquisitions going forward. The China sword policy and the change there, we think, will actually throw a great opportunity to further rationalise the industry. The smaller players that didn't have the...
Such as the SKM, I think.
Exactly right.
Victoria recently.
So guys, industry players that weren't didn't have technology, small scale, who are sending the waste to China, are now left with expensive waste that they have to put in a landfill, and so their businesses become marginalised. Obviously, a company like Cleanaway can buy these businesses and then treat the waste themselves and capture that value. So we think that they're well placed to do quite nicely over the next 5 years or so.
Okay, Andrew, thanks very much for your time. Waste management is part of everyday life. The bigger the population grows, the more waste we're going to have.
Exactly
That's just factual. But there's a lot more to it than just picking up rubbish and putting it in a landfill.
That's right.
Thanks very much for your time, Andrew. Appreciate
Thanks very
the thoughts.
much, Mark. Thanks for the questions. Cheers.